So on May 8th, 2020, the Food and Drug Administration in the USA granted accelerated approval to Selpercatinib, also known as RET-EVMO, also known as LOXO-292, for the following indications. Adult patients with RET metastatic, RET fusion positive non-small cell lung cancer, adult and pediatric patients greater than 12 years of age with advanced or metastatic RET mutant medullary thyroid cancer who require systemic therapy. In addition, this was also approved in adult and pediatric patients over 12 years of age with advanced or metastatic RET fusion positive thyroid cancer who require systemic therapy and who are radioactive iodine refractory if radioactive iodine is appropriate. Again, efficacy was investigated in a multi-center, open-label, multi-cohort, global clinical trial, the Libretto-01 trial, in patients whose tumors harbor the RET alterations. Identification of RET gene alterations was prospectively determined in local labs using either next-gen sequencing, polymerase chain reaction, the PCR, or FISH, fluorescent in situ hybridization. The main efficacy outcomes were objective response rate and response duration determined by a blinded independent review committee using RECIST version 1.1. The efficacy for the RET fusion positive non-small cell lung cancer was evaluated in 105 adult patients previously treated with a platinum-based chemotherapy. The objective response rate based on an independent central review was 64%, and 81% of the responding patients had responses lasting 6 months or longer. Efficacy was also evaluated in 39 patients who had never received any systemic treatment. These are newly diagnosed patients who were discovered to have a RET fusion. The objective response rate for these patients was 85% of responding patients, and 58% of the responding patients had responses lasting 6 months or longer. Efficacy for the advanced metastatic RET mutant medullary thyroid cancer was also investigated in adults, and this included a pediatric cancer cohort of greater than 12 years of age as well. The trial enrolled patients previously treated with multikinase inhibitors such as cabozantinib or vandatinib or both, and patients who had not received these drugs, who were newly diagnosed patients, or those patients with metastatic advanced medullary thyroid cancer who haven't received any of these therapies. The objective response rate for the 55 previously treated patients was 69%. 76% of the responding patients had responses lasting 6 months or longer. Efficacy was also evaluated in 88 patients who had not previously treated with an approved therapy for medullary thyroid cancer. The objective response rate for these patients was 73% of responding patients, and 61% of these responding patients had responses lasting for 6 months or longer. In addition to RET fusion positive non-small cell lung cancer and RET mutant medullary thyroid cancer, efficacy of Selpercatinib was also investigated in RET fusion positive thyroid cancer, again in both adult and pediatric patients. The trial enrolled 19 patients who were radioactive iodine refractory, again if appropriate, and who had received another systemic prior treatment. And 8 patients who were radioactive iodine refractory had not received any additional therapy. The objective response rate for the 19 previously treated patients was 79%, and 87% of the responding patients had responses lasting 6 months or longer. Efficacy was also evaluated in 8 patients who received radioactive iodine and no subsequent therapy. All 8 patients responded, and 75% had responses lasting longer than 6 months or longer. The adverse events. The most common adverse events that included laboratory abnormalities in greater than 25% of patients were increased AST, increased ALT, which are liver function studies, increased glucose, decreased white cell count as manifested by decreased leukocytes, decreased albumin, decreased calcium, dry mouth, diarrhea, increased creatinine, increased alkaline phosphatase, hypertension, fatigue, edema, decreased platelets, decreased sodium, and constipation. Again, the recommended dose of Selpercatinib, also known as RET-EVMO, is weight-based. 120 milligram for patients less than 50 kilos and 160 milligram for those 50 kilos or greater. Again, Selpercatinib is taken twice daily with or without food or with food when co-administered with a proton pump inhibitor. Again, on behalf of all my co-investigators, I thank all these patients who enrolled on this registration clinical trial, who had traveled very long distances, and their motivated family members for bringing the patients. We thank all the global investigators for enrolling patients on this study, and also the company members from Loxo Oncology and now Eli Lilly Corporation. Again, I'd like to thank all the clinical trial staff who went above and beyond behind the scenes to make sure that we have drug access. Important points to note. Again, we got this drug, the FDA approved this drug less than 3 years since the trial enrolled a first-in-human patient. Again, this is unprecedented in oncology. Again, this says that this attests to the fact that we need drugs, we need better drugs for patients, we need good drugs for patients. Again, the safety is reasonable, and the drug is well tolerated in patients. And this has no doubt given the gift of time to these relapsed refractory patients. And in fact, it works much better in treatment-naive patients. One more thing important about this approval is this approval was line agnostic in patients with lung cancer, medullary thyroid cancer. And again, these RET fusions are rare and hard to find. And this is important in the real world setting when the power is given to the oncologists and their patients to decide when to start this therapy.